Hello, everybody. Would like to welcome you back to Kunzwana broadcast. This is Sangwadzi Spiweka Chidzama Fumo. I'm so excited to have you back. I know we've rebranded. We've been away for a while, but we're back. And we'll be getting you more and more exciting guests for our program. And today we've got our first guest, who I know you're all looking forward to hearing from because I did quite a bit of promo on her. This is Dr. Emmie Mahlunge Wade, who is the Executive Director of Kunzwana Women's Association, which is based in Macheke. Welcome to the program, Dr. Wade.
Thank you, Sankwazi Spiwe. Thank you for inviting me to Kunzwana.
You said it well. Maybe we'll give it a minute or two to see who is following us, because some listeners will come in, because right now I'm not seeing anyone in the broadcast who is listening, but they should be popping in anytime now. I know I have it on Facebook and YouTube, but if not, they'll join us as we move on. Dr. Wade, I am really excited to have you here, because it's important that we talk about some of the ordinary people who are doing extraordinary things in our communities. When we started Kunzwana, really it was a community-facing program where we wanted to uplift people in Mutoko, and hence the name Kunzwana is a Buja word. But I have expanded to invite more guests who are doing exceptional things and uplifting our own people. So you are one of those people. Tell me about Kunzwana Women's Association in Macheke. Macheke is a small town with the population of about 3,600, really in the middle of a farming area. Talk to me about your association, how it started, who started it, why you started it.
Thank you so much, Sankwazi Spiwe. Kunzwana Women's Association is actually a brainchild of my mother. My mother was a qualified community participation practitioner from Garnet College at the University of London. Way back in, I think it was 1975, she qualified. And before that, she was a social worker and a school teacher. So she's been engaged in community participation, which now I think we now call community development, from the start of her career, mobilizing women and discussing women's issues from very early on, before we even had the fancy words of women's rights or feminism and self-reliance. But I think that my mother's conviction in starting her own association, her own non-governmental organization in Zimbabwe, and situating it in Macheke, it was because she had actually realized that there was no point in discussing issues around gender-based violence, around women's rights, prevention of disease, child care, HIV and AIDS, if women didn't have an income. The women would come and discuss, and they would go back, especially when it came to gender-based violence. They come, they discuss gender-based violence issues, and they go back to the same problems that they left. So she decided now to focus more on skills training. And in order to do that, she actually acquired a lot of skills herself. She, from very basic skills like knitting, garment making, cooking, home decor, etiquette. She trained herself so that she could actually pass on this information to women. And she actually started when we lived in Highfields, and she established all those market stores in various sections of Highfields. And then she moved at Independence to the Zimbabwe Police, and she was a national coordinator there, again, trying to motivate women to become better than they were and not to be just housewives and not contributing to family incomes. Then after at retirement, she retired early at 57, and then she thought, oh, I can't just sit at home. Let me start my own organization. And she looked around, and she realized that Macheke, which is a farming area, had a lot of women who were on these huge commercial farms. And she then found out that these women were for 3-4 generations of migrant workers from Malawi, Zambia, Mozambique, who were coming to accompany their husbands or male relatives who were working on huge farms. And these women were completely isolated. They were on these farms and did not have networks. No, they didn't have relatives from the rural areas like we have. They just came and they just lived on these farms and had no idea. They had very little knowledge of what was happening outside the farm, the commercial farm. So she went in onto the farms and mobilized women on those farms, and then realized that these women were so backward, so behind everybody else in Zimbabwe. And Macheke, as you know, was really known for a lot of tobacco farming, maize farming, some cattle farming as well, horticulture as well. So there were a lot of women, in flowers. There was a lot of flower cultivation as well in Macheke, which is part of Mashonaland East in our country. So that's basically why she decided, okay, I will now, mobilize first and foremost women in and around Macheke, and started the association, and it is a membership association. And one becomes a member, you get a membership card, you pay your affiliation $20 per year. And then she was just traveling, in a little car, going from farm to farm, talking to the women, starting to now train them in different skills, especially the basic skills like sewing, garment making, knitting, crocheting, macrame, and so forth. And then the thing just grew and grew and grew. More and more women were coming on board.
Okay.
Not just
you hold there, because I was going to ask you, because Machete is about like 107 kilometers from major city from Harare, and so I knew I'm lucky because I happen to know your late mother, Mrs. Emma Mahlunge. She was really an amazing woman for her age group and what she was doing. I have no idea where she got that that focus to imagine developing those areas which were so isolated. I was going to ask, were these women ready for such a thing, or it's something that she actually had to work on them to get them to see the advantage of them joining the association and learning these skills? What was it?
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, they were she and her team. Eventually, she had two other women, Mai Manua and Mai Chingama, working with her, and they were actually regarded as outsiders. The women would say, "Oh, those people from the outside have come," because they were even afraid of them, and the women. We're not used to meeting, people like my mom or people like us who were coming from urban centers, and apparently, with different attitudes, different habits, and even at times different dialects. So they were not at all ready. And guess what? You know what they had to do? They had to pretend like they were also coming to look for work as farm workers. They go to the farm manager and they said, we're looking for seasonal work during the harvesting period of horticulture products. And then they also just wear ordinary clothes and tennis shoes, and they go and they get their hose, and they are given their hose, and they also start working on the farms. But while they're working with the women on these farms, they'll be talking to them, you don't you don't have to be working like this. You can actually have your own
And
trade.
income.
You can actually you can actually do your own thing, and so we'll be meeting at my so and so's tonight. They'll be staying there. They'll stay there. When they went to the farms, they'll be there for 4 to 5 days, or 4 to 5 nights, and we'll be meeting at my so and so you can come if you want. So eventually, it just eventually they were accepted now that, oh, okay, to a point where even the farm owner at the time before the land distribution, the farm owners were mostly white, to a point where even the suspicious white farmers also agreed that, okay, they are farm workers, the women on their farms, or farm workers' wives, as they wanted to call them, can actually be given
Useful.
time to go and be trained and acquire skills, practical skills that they can use for income generation.
Actually, those farmers, they could have started something like that to assist, to help these women, but maybe they just didn't see that opportunity which your mother, took advantage of, and was, mobilizing these women to join and learn skills that could help them.
Yeah, especially the farm owner's wife,
Mm-hmm.
because the farm owner's wife was also apparently just as invisible because she was just a wife, also just concerned with home care,
Mm-hmm.
cooking and looking after children. The children went to private schools at Peterhouse
Mm-hmm.
in Mahlunge, just outside Mahlunge, was actually established especially for that, especially for the farm owners'
Mm-hmm.
children who were in and around Mashore and East, so that they could have, originally to start with a whites-only school. But of course, as we know, it became integrated.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the wife then also, now once the program was now accepted and was becoming popular, the farm owner's wife was now coming to my mother and saying, oh, I can actually help with this. I receive magazines from England, Women's Weekly, Fair Lady. We can actually do recipes. We can do jam making. We can we can make bread. We can make cakes. And the farm, some of them even opened their homes for my mom to come and use the homes as training rooms. So and also, of course, the situation and the experience varied from farm to farm and from farm owner to farm owner. But they were just happy that someone was doing it, and they were happy to jump to contribute, and especially their materials and knowledge that they had, and eventually they would become like coordinators for events such as shows, or and they would even provide transport to the workers to come for trainings.
Okay.
So yeah,
So now, tell me, where you picked it up when your mother passed away, and you picked it up from there going forward? And tell me what has been happening. I know when I was in Zimbabwe a couple of weeks ago, I saw some of the most beautiful, beautiful. Unfortunately, I can't show the the pictures of the umbrellas that they're making in ethnic fabric, and the hats they're making, and just beautiful stuff that these women are now making and selling. Tell me a little bit more about that. Where do you get the markets? And I know initially you said they had to do adult literacy because some of them didn't go to school, but now pick it up from where you took Kunzwana to where we are right now.
actually, what happened was that now, when the program was now growing, and she now had, I think I picked it up when she now had on a database, a membership of about 5,000 women. Now there are 7,800 now women.
Wow.
And then we had the land allocation, the land distribution program. And so it was no longer possible for her to travel from farm to farm. So she acquired land in Macheke, and she actually built physically a training center which sleeps 100 women at a time. It's with boarding facilities. It has 5 workshops and conference facilities.
What do
So
you mean? This is it sleep? You have people who sleep there. Do they come for training?
yes, they come. Yeah, the women come. Yeah, the women now come from wherever they are now, where
Mhm.
they've been integrated into the villages now. So, that's why now Kunzwana Women's Association is a national non-governmental organization, because it has broadened its scope now to target anybody, even those who are in rural areas. So they can also become members and they can come for trainings.
Okay, so
Now,
they don't
as you
have
know,
to be. They don't have to be from farming areas in
no, not
Machete
anymore.
anymore. Okay.
Not anymore. Yeah, no, the program, the organization has grown and transcended to now target all these other women. Now, as you know, Spiwe, I was working for almost 20 years in multilateral institutions such as the United Nations Development Program, UNDP. I worked in different countries, including Bratislava, in Slovakia, at the time when Slovakia was now transitioning from Eastern, philosophy
Mhm.
to Western
Mhm.
philosophy. And my experience with in the United Nations was, especially when it came to women and women's economic empowerment, was that there seemed to be a disconnect between what was considered as business and how women can be engaged in serious business,
Mhm.
not no longer just crafts for income generation, but to start right from the word go to get women interested in becoming business people.
Yeah.
And in that background, when I was working in Bratislava, and then I moved to South Africa and continued with the same continued with the same programs of economic empowerment for women. And while I was at UNDP, we were developing policy, upstream policy for policymakers in different African countries on economic development, political and economic issues. But I kept on wondering, how can all this economic development and all this macro level economic development that we discuss in these high level meetings,
Mhm.
how can it affect the women at grassroots level, you know? And when I would come back from work and I'd talk to my mother and I say, but there's this policy, there is this program now, there is integration of women into small to medium business, but can the, and then my mother would say, but then the women are not ready. They, as you said, they don't have literacy. They
Mhm.
don't know finance. They are not at all ready. And then in discussion, when I now took over from my mother,
Mhm.
the first thing that I did was to discuss with the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe to see how we could introduce and implement. And I'm so happy that the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe implemented and launched what we now call the National Financial Inclusion Strategy. Now, that
Now, I'd
strategy,
like to hold you there. I don't want to sound too academic here, and I still want to draw you back to Macheke, all right? Because those things don't mean anything to the average woman who come for your training.
that's
That's
correct.
yes, it's
That
important
is
for your strategy, what you're doing over there, and for writing papers and funding and all that. But when we come, let's come back to them. Let's come back to these women. How is it? How is are you translating what you are talking about into their daily lives?
Yeah, this is the disconnect which I was referring earlier on. That
Mhm.
these high level policy formulations didn't and rarely actually address the grassroots woman's needs.
Mhm.
So I just got interested in this. I just got interested in coming from a very high level position in UNDP, and now decoding everything so that it relates
Mhm.
and it speaks to a grassroots, a rural woman, or a
Mhm.
woman operating in rural areas,
Yes, that's true.
So when we were discussing this financial inclusion strategy, we found out that actually most of these rural women they don't have banks. They are
Yeah.
not banked. They are not banked. They have never even been to a bank. So I started from there, from the financial influence. You have to understand money. You have to actually physically touch, experience
Mhm.
money. And to do so, you have to have a relationship with a bank. And then when we talked now to the banks, and the bank executives said they don't have infrastructure in rural areas. You see, for these women to have a relationship with money. Spiwe, I tell you, there were women whom we spoke to who would go for almost 12 months, and in 12 months they will have only held 25 US dollars in 12 months. So the idea was no, 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 let's start making marketable products that can be sold to the high end, to high end markets. We started now making the quilts that I showed you. We
Yes.
started we started actually now doing research to find out what the high end markets would like from the rural areas, and we were very surprised that especially among the Zimbabwean community, that they really actually appreciate, as long as the workmanship
It's
is
good.
perfect. Is perfect. And the materials used, and we have branded ourselves to say we use natural resources,
Mm-hmm.
like the bigger baskets, for
Mm-hmm.
example, and the cotton fabrics, for example, and natural dyes when we do our tie and dyes, and
Mm-hmm.
batik use natural dyes as well, and carpentry. They do the
Mm-hmm.
women do carpentry, they do welding, they do nutritious meals, horticulture, and they do food processing. At the moment, we've just introduced cassava flour onto the market. And
Mm-hmm.
we've also introduced sweet potato flour onto the market, because the women were growing these sweet potatoes. And after the season is finished, there is
That's
no
it.
more sweet potatoes. And yet we are now being told by the bakers that they actually are running gluten-free lines of bakery products. So we are now discussing with the market. In fact, it's already on the market. We are already selling now to supermarkets through another company. You can now find sweet potato flour. You can find cassava flour, which the customers use to make cakes,
Mhm.
bread, muffins.
And you know what I really liked when I looked at the products that these women are making? There has been a shift and a move towards ethnic fabrics and things that they can relate to, things that are easy to access, because I mean there's a lot of cotton in Zimbabwe, and
That's
they
correct.
yes, and they're making beautiful stuff, which before people had to buy things that come from other countries with things that they can't really relate to. But I found that very interesting, and the baskets that they're making, it's a pity because we don't have the pictures to show of the workmanship. It's beautiful, and that's great. And but I was going to ask, now with the adult literacy, it's important for them to be introduced to money. It's even my grandmother who couldn't write her name, she knew money. She just knew money. But to understand what processes are to bank money and to withdraw money, I'd like to assume you had to teach them all that.
Yes, in fact, we're to teach them what we call functional literacy.
Mm-hmm.
Because even when they are making garments, you have to teach them measurements,
Mm-hmm.
and the measurements may not always be in the language that you and I understand.
Mm-hmm.
We may sometimes use strings so that they, this is what is a meter,
Yeah.
or this is 2 meters, and so forth. And when it came to money, particularly with regards to banking, we then advocated. I mean, now we find it now quite easily in Zimbabwe, but at the
Yeah.
time, there was very little agent banking,
Yeah.
apart from other, mobile companies, mobile phone companies.
Mm-hmm.
They had a level of agent banking, but now it's now available as long as there's network. So we started from there. We started from, if you are selling tomatoes, and you are making $5 a day from the sale of your tomatoes,
Mm-hmm.
$1 must be saved. So by the end of the week, you have $5. By the end of the month, you have $20.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of the year, you have $200.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to kind of start from the very, very basic. And then, of course, as you know, our Zimbabwean women already, even when I came to join Kunzwana Women's Association, they already had a culture of what they call marounds, where
Mm-hmm.
they save amongst themselves and they co-guarantee each other.
Mm-hmm.
And when we went now to microfinance institutions, it was very easy for us to convince them that they can actually lend money to these women because they already had a culture of
Yeah.
co-guaranteeing each other. And a lot, the ones that we've signed partnerships with, they've won awards because they get all their money every month, and women do not default. They rarely default unless if there's a major disaster like some traumatic experience, such as a death in the family or
Yeah.
floods, or Freddy's, tornado or something like
Uh-huh.
that. But otherwise, the women, they really respect when their loan commitments. So
That's
with
very
the
true. I
loans,
think
yeah.
you talk to
So with the
anybody,
loans,
anybody
they,
in
they
banking, they do understand that, if you give a loan to women, they are likely to pay.
to pay
Yeah,
back.
and like if they give to their husbands because stories come and the money is not paid and all that stuff. That's I totally agree. I totally
Yes, women are really committed, and I think it's because of the natural
Mhm.
nurturing, aspect, because they know that if they were to default and if the program didn't go ahead, at the end of the day, it will only mean poverty for a family.
Yeah.
And and sometimes it may even mean not so much bankruptcy, but total destruction of their
Well,
investment.
it
So,
affects
so
their children, and it really matters to these women.
yeah,
Uh,
there are some of the microfinance institutions now, they request for either a cow or two or three goats as collateral, but
collateral.
they don't take them. You keep your cow, you keep your two or three goats that you will have registered as collateral, just in case,
Mhm.
So in our association, we've only had one woman whose cow was sold because she
Mm.
couldn't repay back. But otherwise, the repayment, I think at the moment, according to our records, has been 98%
Okay.
success rate. Yeah.
We've got 2 minutes left to end of program because our program Kano is now 30 minutes, and if we want somebody to come back, we can always invite them back the following week or the week after. So in the 2 minutes that we have, can you talk to me about where do you get the markets where you sell these things? Do you export them, and how do the women benefit from the sale of their products?
Actually, we started by just showcasing the products,
Mhm.
especially with the products when they are innovative, if they are creative, if sufficiently creative and
Mhm.
interesting, people just come,
Mhm.
So we started just showcasing the products in Harare and in major the city centers, Harare and Bulawayo, during the agricultural show, during the trade fair. We partnered with Zimtrade when, Zimtrade were having overseas marketing visits, would give them our samples. And then, we'll just receive phone
Yeah.
calls to say, would like to come and see you. We would like so many products, so many, the umbrellas, the ethnic inspired umbrellas,
Mhm.
the ethnic inspired blankets,
Mhm.
the ethnic fashion
Mhm.
for high-end women, and the styles, and the crochet. Crochet can actually be made into very, very interesting styles. They make
True.
very interesting styles and garments from crochet. And so that's how we managed to get. It was really initially by word of mouth. It is now a lot more structured, but initially it was by word of mouth.
I don't know how to thank you, Dr. Wade, for coming. I know it feels like so short. You wanted to hear some more, but thank you so much for coming to Kanoiwanyai broadcast and sharing with us what you do with Kunzwana Women's Association and To our followers, thank you for following us, and we hope to invite you again, and you can talk to us more about what's happening in Macheke in your association. Thank you so much. From me, Sangwadzi Spiwekachiza Mapfumo. I'll meet you next week. We'll have another guest, and I know you're going to enjoy it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you.